Since my previous 2 episodes were looking into how to design and write decent villains, or in some cases criminals, I want to do some world building on the laws of the Pokemon world again. After all, they can't be criminals unless they have laws they can break. And how can these new laws have an impact on the game mechanics? Diving straight into it, we can design the laws of the Pokemon world pretty straightforward from the game mechanics. Let's start with what we know from them. Rule number 1. You can't carry more than 6 Pokemon on your person. I brought this up before in my video on the world building around Pokeballs, where I explored what laws would surround that technology, and I'll expand on it more in just a moment. If you haven't, I would also recommend watching my episode Professors and the Pokedex, where I introduced the Pokemon University. Since this episode is really focusing on building upon the narrative I constructed in that episode, I'm going forward as if you have. Rule number 2. Battling is gambling. There is no denying this. You win the battle, you win money. You lose the battle, you lose money. It's not gambling like you would at a roulette table, but it's like putting $20 on your favorite sports ball team. Even beating bad guys who are about to destroy the universe stop to give you some cash for beating them and then slink back into the shadows. Why should they give you money? They are criminals. They don't have to follow the rules. What is also interesting is that really only Team Rocket expressed the heaviest interest in money. For most everyone else, battling is just a sport or a hobby. You'd think that for something as life-supporting as the local currency can be, people would have a less casual approach. This point is especially noticeable in how few people actually capture and use up to the 6 Pokemon limit. Unless, of course, this currency means something else in this world. This is essentially an if true, else what segment, so with these in mind, I'm going to elaborate on them. You are only allowed 6 Pokemon on your person. This is perfectly fair and balanced. With each Pokemon being limited to 2 types defensively, you can't possibly cover the 18-wide chart. You can more than cover it offensively because they each know 4 moves, but that demands pretty solid strategizing from the player. To refresh on what I said in the Pokeballs episode, we could have a law that states you are only allowed to have 6 Pokemon under your ownership, period. Collecting badges is what allows the average person to capture more, since they have then proven themselves to be a capable and hopefully responsible trainer. The player being an understudy of the local professor means that you have a special license to catch and train as you please. However, thanks to this law, you are still only allowed 6 on your person at any time. Just to tangent for a moment, while looking at the law of 6, there is a great opportunity for some background world building here. Let me give you an example by looking at the workforce. Because you can't have more than 6, large construction jobs might require 60 Machop on site. This means that companies would employ a minimum of 10 workers who have specialized in the field of large construction work. Or perhaps instead of someone catching Pokemon to fit the work they do, they look for work that fits the Pokemon they happen to have. Someone has managed to raise a Pidgeot and a Gyarados. What jobs could they look for? Perhaps long-distance mail delivery. To quickly look at Genshin Impact, the developers have put thought behind every single named NPC in their world, what they do for a living, and what relationships they have with the other people in that world. Pokemon could really benefit from having that same level of attention to detail. Why does this NPC have these Pokemon? What do they do for a living? How are those Pokemon involved in that day-to-day routine? If you have given this NPC a name, give them a life. So, how does this tie into our criminal villains? Well, if Team Bad Guys break laws, then what if they not only had more than 6 Pokemon on them at a time, but also brought them out to battle you all at once? This could be a very interesting mechanic gameplay-wise. How this could happen in a battle is that since the grunt can only give 1 instruction at a time, only the Pokemon that know that move will all attack. Because the battle could be suggested as being fast-paced, see my talk on Pokemon's graphics, perhaps they intentionally throw out lots of the same Pokemon so they can give them all the same instruction. Area of effect abilities like Blizzard or Razor Leaf become very valuable in these fights and would need to be considered when building a team. Suddenly, a grunt having 6 low-level Rattata and 2 Ekans on their team goes from a joke to an actual threat. Ekans don't know quick attack, so it would skip a turn, but if I was being hit with 6 times the normal damage before my Pokemon could get a turn, even if they were all really low level, it would bring a sweat to my brow. These are criminals. There are profits to be made, and they don't care for the rules. I believe there could be really interesting mechanics to enforce this, not to mention how well this could antagonize the player. Anyway, now let's look at the world's gambling addiction. As far as I can find, money in the Pokemon world has never really been given a name, at least not in the mainline games. They have their own unique symbol, which is cool. Bulbapedia calls it Pokemon Dollar, and Pokemon Go uses the term Pokecoin, and I think that is fairly acceptable, so I'll use that from now on. Is Pokecoin used for everything or just for Pokemon-related things? Everyone is rather casual about Pokemon battling. It is just a hobby, just for fun. Why is that? It would mean that the currency exchanged in battle has very little value or applicable use. Fair enough, we have seen players be able to buy things outside of Pokemon-related equipment, such as clothing and bikes, but this is a world-building exercise, so let's leave that behind. Perhaps the government, or whatever system they have, gives food, travel, housing, clothing, electricity, water, communication, entertainment, and more to everyone, free of charge, leaving the only thing that money is good for anymore: Pokemon. It would certainly give more weight to its namesake if this was the case. Why would villains be after Pokecoin? Because Pokemon are walking weapons of relatively notable destruction. If you have vast amounts of Pokecoin to buy all the potions and Pokeballs you want, then you have a solid method of cultivating strength. If you have powerful Pokemon on your team, you could bully people into doing whatever you want. Pokemon is power, and power is the ability to influence the behavior of others or the course of events. If you will allow me another villainous tangent for this episode, here are just some of the broad number of methods to gain power by the things you control. Money, that thing you use to exchange for everyday goods such as food. Ownership, the land, house, and objects that people use. Resources, food, water, electricity, land, medicine, etc. Safety, offering it against danger or being the danger yourself. Emotional security, good morale keeps a society productive. Religious belief, being the head of a cult or religion, or in other words, safety of the afterlife. Accumulation of knowledge. People can't defend against what they don't know, and therefore rely on those who do to keep them safe. This can result in leadership when combined with influence. Pokemon definitely supply more than one of these things. They can produce resources such as water, milk, electricity, silk, medicine, and even delicious tails. The first thing you learn in a Pokemon game is that you need them for safety in the world against wild Pokemon and from other trainers. There have been religious beliefs surrounding Pokemon for thousands of years. Pokemon is power, so Pokecoin is power. Of course, we can't talk about accumulating power without talking about the most direct source of extreme weaponized potential: legendary Pokemon. At the end of each game, they usually end up in the hands of the player. However, they seem to be released after a time because we see them make a return to the wild in the following generations. This would probably be another law put in place. Some Pokemon impact the environment in such a profound way that removing them from their habitats for too long could cause harm. Being that legendaries tend to be rather elusive, people don't know enough about those Pokemon to risk that potential harm for too long. Hence, the player character eventually releases them. But let's talk about the people who wouldn't release them for a minute. Villains are the reason why legendaries became the main focus of the plot for every Pokemon game since the 3rd generation, with Scarlet and Violet only just now breaking that trend. It's hard to argue against doing that, I just gave the reasons why. But as I showed previously with Team Eco, they don't have to be the focus. However, the reality is that for all future games, there will be a mix of times where the plot does indeed revolve around bad people getting, or attempting to get, a rare and powerful beast. Since this is an occasion that keeps repeating itself, society is naturally going to react to that. They must come up with ways of producing trainers that can respond to such emergencies without having to rely on 10-year-olds all the time. That system is, of course, Pokemon Champions. From the actions we can observe over the series, such as that scene from Lance in Gold and Silver or Leon in Sword and Shield, These people seem to operate outside the law to handle such problems. Since this is something I would like to go into greater detail on, I'll leave it to a later episode. For now, I have just one last thing. Criminals versus the Pokemon University. Like I said before, the accumulation of knowledge is a major source of power and influence. That makes the Pokédex project that you are in charge of a very real threat to criminal organizations, especially the locally employed understudy who has a license to capture and train however many Pokemon they want. The ability to train and catch all the best Pokemon is reserved for those who understand them best, and the Pokédex is fast becoming a publicly accessible source of knowledge. This just won't do. On that note, reoccurring villains. Traditionally, Pokemon villains stay trapped in their generation, and with good reason. The games are currently designed to be as approachable as possible to new players, but with a reboot, we could reconsider that approach and introduce reoccurring villains. I will note here, however, this idea both delights and terrifies me. If the villains are cool and genuinely threatening, then it would be awesome to see them again. But if they are goofy, the writing for them is terrible, or we just encounter them too many times, the players, myself included, will get really tired of them very quickly. You'll see in my Rivals episode, there's a fine line between, oh my god, leave me alone, and I guess I met you once at the start of the game? One way that might not be so grating is if the organization is encountered through charmingly recognizable characters like, Jesse and James? Inside the narrative idea of the Pokemon University and the player being the head of research, there's easily room for a shadowy, rival organization that is pulling the strings behind some of the villainous deeds you encounter through the series. Note the word some. It's a worn-out trope to have a single villain or evil organization that is mysteriously and improbably responsible for every bad thing the protagonist comes across. It is very easy for writers to fall into the trap of reaching for the same villains over and over, rather than considering if the reoccurring villain is really the best answer to who is doing the antagonizing here. It is telling of lazy world building when it happens. After all, in our world, not every time someone does something evil is the result of instructions given to them by one shadowy cult. Any regular person is capable of aspiring to become a maniacal villain in their own right, for their own reasons. Reoccurring villains aren't meant to be a one-size-fits-all villainous plans. Villains reoccur either because there is genuinely more to their story arc, or because their motivations and personality already suit the narrative. Letting them appear repeatedly allows us to grow more invested in stopping them once and for all. But Pokemon is not a series about taking down team bad guys. It is about making friends and going on an adventure. Even reoccurring villains should have their stories brought to a close and clear the way for others to take center stage. Maybe the actions they took inspired the next villain, or maybe they turned over a new leaf and they are now helping you stop the next ones. In any case, I wouldn't want a villain organization to be encountered more than 3 times. Okay, I'm done talking about villains. Hopefully between these whopping 3 episodes, I've shown how villains can be written to be memorable, fulfill their purpose to the protagonist and the player, as well as the many world-building opportunities they're intertwined with. Next time, I'll talk about Rivals. I hope to see you then. In the meantime, you should let people know about my channel by sharing my videos. Seriously, the YouTube algorithm will never truly bless me. I'm relying on word of mouth here. So if you do enjoy my work, you can do that, and also press the like button, hit the blossom, leave a comment, and of course, continue to be wonderful to each other.